Hello, welcome to the channel. I'm just going to go over really quick. I posted on STO builds a couple of builds for Star Trek Online. I just wanted to talk about this elite tank build. I thought it might be a little bit better if I could talk about it and sort of explain some of the decision making and why it works rather than typing up a wall of text. So I'll try not to make the video too long. So I'm using the Kelvin Timeline Heavy Command Cruiser. Two reasons for that. It's got your command abilities. Always good to have. The damage resistance one's okay. Some extra hull regen. And then this is the one I mainly use. 33% bonus damage to the team, which is great. And then it's also got attract fire, extra 100% threat generation, and you're pretty much always going to be trying to generate threat on this build. So I know in normal and advanced TFOs you really don't need a tank. When I play advanced I don't even bring any heals at all. You just kill everything so fast that they don't have time to shoot you. But in elites it's not quite like that. So in elites you really want, the roles are a little more clearly defined. You've got a couple of people who are concentrating on DPS, maybe someone concentrating on debuffing to help those guys out, and then you need a tank. And the idea behind the tank is to absorb, ideally 80%, maybe more, of threat across the map. That way, your guys that don't have any heals that are concentrating on doing damage don't have to worry about dying, as dead ship is 0 DPS. So the ship's got a pretty decent hull capacity modifier. I'm just sitting in Sol on 124,000 some. Or I do have all the hull capacity traits, so that's nice. And none in healing, which I'll explain here. You'll notice my hotbars here, I don't have any heals, and I'll kind of explain how that works, but let me just run through the equipment. So I'm running the Disco, Torpedo, and Lorca's console for the extra almost 4% crit chance and 25% severity. Good to have. And then other than that, bowl beams in the rear, and the link sentry, that's the Lobie beam, and the Lobie torpedo, along with the Lobie console. So that gets me this active clicky ability, 50% bonus anti-proton damage for 30 seconds. It's a decent clicky. It does add some damage, but it's not the end-all be-all. I mean, there's definitely other, you could trade out this console slot with something else. The extra, the control immunity is nice. If you get a tractor beam on you, you usually can get out of it for free basically the first time. But you could run just these two weapons and keep what we're mainly after here, which is the two-piece set, which is the refraction. Not really about the bonus damage, I mean that helps, but it's that the weapons chain an additional time. So the way bio refraction works is every time you fire or land a target hit, it refracts to another target for 5% damage, and that refraction will occur across a whole 10 kilometers. So if you're shooting an enemy that is 10 kilometers away from you, it will refract and hit another enemy up to 10 kilometers away from that, which means that you can hit a target 20 kilometers away with the refraction. With the two-piece, extend that out to 30 kilometers because it'll refract a third time. So you can basically extend your damage out 30 kilometers, up to 30 kilometers with the two-piece bowl set. Now there is a bowl anti-proton Omni that drops from the lockbox pack. Super rare, super expensive on the exchange. If I had the AC I would buy one, but I don't. Maybe something I could add someday, but that might be a better slot here in the rear. The other thing is, in a 4-4 layout like this, I assume I'm going to spend some time at a kind of odd angle where my torpedo is hitting and so are my rear beams, so like kind of a tilted broadside. But if you wanted, you could run like dual beam banks up front and turrets in the rear and just keep that keep that fire on targets in front of you. You might be able to squeeze a bit more damage out that way, but really the point of this build is to fly into the thick of things, sit there in the middle or circle in the middle, and get everything possible to shoot at you all at once. So I've never had a problem keeping these rear standard arrays firing plenty. So as far as consoles, I'll just run through them. Domino seems obvious, bonus damage, and you do usually get the full duration about it, because I know it says if you defeat a foe, but I've definitely landed like a refraction hit on a target that someone else killed, and it still extended my domino time. So I usually, since you're spreading out your damage across such a wide area of the map, that's a good one. Temporal Trajectory Shifter gives you a little bit more haste. The haste is really good with these beams because they keep refracting, and I'll explain a little bit as we get further into it. But the haste is good, a little extra cooldown and defense, but it's mainly for the enemies. Lowers their firing speed. You can use it on like Attack Cube or the Queen or whatever, high tier enemy you're fighting. Little debuff and prevent them from shooting back as hard. Assimilated modules just here for crits. I would swap this out with DPRM if I had it. I just don't have DPRM on this character because I'm a Fed and it's a billion EC. Bioneural Infusion, it's there for crits, but also some hull capacity. Not bad. I already talked about this one. The Fakiri Torment Engine increases damage over time, so just remember that. I'll explain that part in a second. And then 3 of the Colony Protomatter consoles. So every time you activate any energy ability, so it's Fire at Will or Cannon Scatter Volley, you got a 25% chance to heal 5% of your hull 5 times. So basically 25% hull per console. And if you're really lucky, sometimes you'll hit it. See there, I only got 1 stack. But sometimes I'll activate and I'll get all 3. And that's awesome. It's 75% hull heal over 10 seconds. I don't think there's a heal in the game that heals that much. And then the other critical component to that is this console, Hull Image Refractors. So it's not really about that damage. It's nice to have, but the main thing is that the incoming heals going over your max hull apply temporary hit points. And the temporary hit points last for 30 seconds, which is a pretty long time. And that stacks, it doesn't say on here, but it stacks 20 times. And then remember these consoles 5 times per console, a stack of 5% of your hull. Critical thing about building stacks with this console is the reason why I have no heals, and I only use Brace for Impact if I'm like already in trouble and I'm gonna die. But say I have 20 stacks of 6,000 hull each because these consoles have been activating constantly in combat. If I activate hazard emitters, and hazard emitters puts 300 healing per tick for 15 seconds, that's 15 stacks gone that are now only stacks of 300 instead of 15 stacks of 6,000 temporary hull. So similarly, that's why my emergency escape stay alive console is the Protomatter projector. It's a huge regen, not a huge hull heal. So for example, the Kobali Samsar console heals you for outgoing energy damage, but they're heals. So if you have stacks of Protomatter building up, it'll wipe them out. You don't really want that. I mean, regen only applies to your main hull. It doesn't apply to temporary hull. So like if I'm building some temporary hull, here I got some stacks. You'll see it building. I'm building some temporary hull. If I get hit and my temporary hull goes down, it doesn't regen. I'm not good enough to micromanage like activating the Kobali console only when I see green here. Usually once I see my ship has turned green instead of pink, that's a sign to me that I've been hit really hard and I'm in trouble. So I never really want to rely too much on regen rate, although it's it's nice to have. And that's why I still slot the Disco 2-piece set. You get this 120% hull regen, and that's just a nice kind of insurance method. Once your temporary hull falls off and stuff starts hitting you, you regen back up to 100, and you can start building that temporary hull again as fast as you can. And then I'm also using the Colony Deflector for crits, of course, and then the competitive engines. Main reason for the competitive engines is that you want to be fast. We've all played an HSC or an ISE or something like that where someone, the second the timer cools down, they shoot ahead of everyone at full impulse, fly right into the thick of things, and get blown up by a couple of angry tack cubes that focus fire on them. So you got to be ahead of that person. Your objective would be to keep everyone alive in this build. And that also couples in another thing that's nice about that Boole stuff. So let's look at the layout. We'll start from the bottom and go down. Suppression Barrage 3. So this Suppression Barrage will knock off 50% of the outgoing damage of your target, among other debuffs. But the refractions also activate this. So if I shoot a target, again, that 30 kilometer DPS sphere comes into play. If I shoot a target 10 kilometers away, they're debuffed 50% outgoing damage. then the bow refraction hits another target 20 kilometers away from me now, or 30 kilometers away from me now, they're still being debuffed. So, you know, if you're playing HSE and you're kind of like in the middle of things, and you have a teammate that's like way out on the fringes fighting, you know, a tac cube around the backside or something like that, you're still able to debuff the tac cube all the way out that far because of the refraction. So that's a lot better than reverse shield polarity, which is what I used before. Reverse shield polarity, it's a nice like get out of jail free card, emergency, you know, stay alive, heal ability to use, but it only helps you, right? And, you know, keeps your tank alive, which is still good, but this is a command seated ship, so suppression barrage is a huge help. 2 copies of Octobat to get the cooldowns as quickly as possible. Emergency power to weapons, that plays into the traits. Emergency power to engines, again, you got to get ahead of your team and you know, stay in combat area as quickly as possible. If you're playing other elites like Corfez, for example, you might have to move from one combat area to another very quickly, so you've got to have engines here. Don't worry about your shields. You're going to have so much regen, it won't matter. Then for the other 2 seats, I'm running tactical. These are both Romulan tacs for their crit abilities. Fire at Will 3, attack pattern Delta. That's anything that's attacking you will get debuffed. Delta, though, it's got a 45-second recharge, and it only lasts for 15 seconds. And that kind of plays in with a DOF that I'm running. I'll get to that in just a second. And then the other one, Cannon Scatter Volley, is only here to proc those protomatter consoles. Chance to heal. So, you know, there's one. And then Torpedo Spread, and that is also to go with the traits. I'm running Entwined Tactical Matrices. And the main reason for that is that will give me a little bit more uptime on fall. Chemocyte, the reason I'm running Chemocyte 3 instead of like Spread 3 and Chemocyte 1 or something a little more normal. Chemocyte 3 does a lot more damage resistance debuff, and this 10% chance to apply on hit for energy weapons seems to count even on refractions. So again, with the Baul weapons, you're refracting to multiple targets. Each time there's a 10% chance to land this debuff in this hit. So I get a lot of damage from this. And then this last seat is a temporal seat, and I use entropic redistribution mainly because it has the fastest cooldown on it. That's not a heal, so causal reversion is a heal. And again, 2,000 hit points. It's going to throw off your 6,000 plus hit point protomatter heals. So don't use that. Don't use any heals. Same thing with hazard emitters. That's a mistake. Entropic redistribution shoots every 20 seconds. And then chronometric inversion field. I originally was using Very Cold in Space for this, but this is a little bit better. Not only does it debuff the damage of the target within a 5 kilometer sphere, also slows their flight speed down, builds some entropy that goes off of redistribution. It plays very nicely with this build. The reason I use these 2 temporal seats is for the duty officers. So this guy, 11 of 47, every time I activate attack or temporal ability, chance to activate Delta, attack pattern Delta. So while Delta is on cooldown and I'm running through my attack abilities, I have Entropic on my spam bar here. 7 and 8 just spam together as I'm pressing spacebar. So I get a chance to get attack pattern Delta up again, even while Delta is on cooldown and should, you know, be locked out by global cooldown. This DOF ignores global cooldown, so you have a chance to get Delta up even while your copy is on cooldown. And same thing when you activate chronometric inversion field, but I keep that one separate for you know, when I need it. The other DOFs, 2 technicians. I don't have my second purple one, but it's doing fine even without it. For Octobat, chance to gain crit severity, chance to gain crit chance. These guys don't stack, so don't run like 2 severity or 2 chance. And then this guy got super lucky and got him on the exchange a long time ago. Extra 20% crit severity. Now, this fabrication engineer that does the Delta Prime thing, another reason why I stopped using reverse shield polarity is you can only have one of these fabrication engineer up at a time. And the fabrication engineer that extends the time for reverse shield polarity will take that slot. And I'd rather have Delta up more often than an extra, you know, 8 seconds of RSP. So that's kind of how the build is laid out, and that links in with the traits. So attack pattern Delta Prime, build some crits when you're using Delta. And these crits do build off of the DOF thing. So if I activate a temporal ability or attack ability and I get a free attack pattern Delta, and I get hit during that, I keep building crit stacks. Cold-Hearted. So it's a nice debuff to your target, some damage resistance, some flight speed, a little bit of power reduction. The main thing about Cold-Hearted is 5 stacks max from all sources. So if you're running Cold-Hearted on the tank, and the tank should always run Cold-Hearted, basically. No one else should run this trait. It's a waste. Because this tank with the refractions will spread Cold-Hearted out basically across the map in what's essentially a 30-kilometer wide sphere. This ship will build all stacks of Cold-Hearted in 2 firing cycles, which is like 6 seconds or something across the whole map. So no one else should run this, just you. So make sure if you're in a coordinated team, someone's using Cold-Hearted, tell them to take it off and use something else, anything else. Even the tiniest extra damage trait would be better than Cold-Hearted, because an extra stack is wasted. Emergency weapon cycle. Some weapon power costs, which is nice because we'll be using attract fire instead of weapon efficiency. And 20% more haste, which is nice. You can get those chemosite shots out more frequently. Entwined tactical matrices. This is mainly here purely to keep FAW up basically 100% of the time. And in combat, that seems to be the case, or nearly the case. There is another trait, redirecting arrays. When you're using fire at will and you get hit, which you are all the time in this build, it extends the duration, but only to 15 seconds. And fire at will has a 20-second global cooldown. There's 5 seconds of downtime if you slot this trait that you're not firing with fire at will. Whereas with entwined tactical matrices, you can circumvent that global cooldown and basically get your fire at will up 100%. So that's why that's there. And just to play into that, that's why I have the Disco Torp. And then these next 2 traits are critical. So history will remember. Some damage, some regen. Hull cap is nice, but the main reason I'm using it is an extra 300% threat. So especially like towards the end when you're fighting like a TAC cube or something in ISE or the Queen and HSE, you're going to be doing a lot less damage than if you have a teammate with you that's doing 1,000,000 DPS in like a science build or a Vaadwaur Juggernaut or something crazy like that. You've got to get your threat really, really high. So 300% from threat gen, an extra 100% from attract fire, and then an extra 300% from this. I mean, you could be doing a quarter of the damage of someone on your team, and everything is still shooting you instead. And that's what you want. You don't want your teammates to get hit, and this is a good way to ensure that. Plus the console that comes with it is pretty good, the ship that this is on. Honored Dead is another really good one. It's relatively cheap right now on the exchange. I'd say if you're even thinking about tanking, you should pick one of these up ASAP. Pick a couple up ASAP. I feel like they're not going to last too long at the prices they're at, because this comes from a Klingon ship. But basically you build up some damage resistance, some health regen, build some temporary hit points. For reputation traits, well, let me just show the specializations real quick so we can cover that first, because it plays a role. So I'm using Miracle Worker as the primary. You get 50% hull regen, some damage resistance, some bonus damage when you're being hit, and then this nice active ability for some extra max hull and like a critical spot of the battle. I'm using Temporal as the secondary, and that's for Entropic Rider. So this damage over time with the Bowel Refraction, just like Chemosite, seems to run that chance every time you hit. You get Entropic Rider hits a lot, and it adds up to a pretty sizable amount of damage at the end of the run. Sizable enough that it's worth slotting this and the Torment Engine over what technically would be the tankier option, which is Strategist. So if you don't have the Bowel beams, maybe you would slot Chemosite 1 and Spread 3 instead, and you might use Strategist, because while threatening 20% incoming hull healing, that additional 20% hull healing applies to the Protomatter consoles. So say you get a 6,000 HP heal from Protomatter, you'll get 20% more if you have Strategist activated as your secondary. And I've experimented a little bit with like running Temporal as the primary and Strategist as the secondary, but I think ultimately the regen, where you have this wall, where you've got some temporary hit points build up and you take a bunch of hits and you get knocked down to your regular hull, the enemy kind of runs into a wall because they cut through your temporary hit points no problem, and then all of a sudden you're regenning at a very high rate, and it's hard to cut through that, and then you can start building your temporary hull stacks again. So that seems to work a little bit better. And then the other thing is this continuity thing where it snaps you back a couple of kilometers, 8 kilometers. If you're like at the edge of the map or right in front of the TAC cube or something at the end of ISE, and this happens and it snaps you back, you know, sometimes I've been snapped through the map before, or I've been dumped like out of range, and it just, for a tank where you want to stay in combat and keep attracting threat as long as possible, it's just not, it just doesn't help your team out very much. I'd rather have that turned off and know where my ship is, and very rarely have I encountered a situation where the ship is going to die. So, okay, so back to traits real quick. Reputation traits are easy. Crit severity for Dyson, Romulan, crit chance, all weapon damage increase, and then Radiant Detonation Matrix. Again, it's another one of those small chance abilities that refracts off of the Baul to do a bunch of radiation damage. It adds up to a decent amount of damage. I would use it if you're using Baul stuff. Tyler's Duality builds up some crit chance, and one thing about this crit chance is that it does not include your temporary hull. So if I start building temporary hull stacks, you'll see that number stays the same. But since you're going to be, you know, increasing your max hull from threatening stance, and history will remember, you'll get pretty close to that maximum 7.5% on this build. So it's definitely worth slotting. And then another thing, if you're not using Baul or you feel a little squishier, I would drop Radiant Detonation Matrix. And then another really good one to put in here is the automated protomatter conduits. You get a nice shield regen, a hull regen, and again, it's a regen, right? So it doesn't screw up your temporary stacks. A lot of people run this this one, Energy Refrequencer. You'll see it only heals 450 per trigger. So I know it's happening a lot, but if you have 20 stacks of 6,000 each, and you get healed for 450 5 times, that's 5 less stacks of 6,000 that you could have had. So don't use any healing like this on this build. And the only other option I guess maybe worth mentioning is there's a 25% hull regen that's up all the time, but no shield regen. So the protomatter one, it's better. You get a shield regen, and it's up basically 50% of the time. Alright, so that covers those. Space traits, so just run through real quick. Good day to die because I'm attack and bonus damage. Extra resistance, awesome. Adaptive offense, basically for the crit severity. Beam training, I'd use superior beam training if I had it, don't have it yet. Context is for kings. I'm a maybe on this one, actually. I may try removing this. The extra damage resistance is great, but you're already getting a ton of damage resistance from Honored Dead. A lot, actually. 200 damage resistance. And we're talking here just adding a measly extra 30, so it's really not all that useful. And a lot of people run this when they're doing DPS because if you're not being hit, then you get this bonus damage. On this build, you're always being hit, so you'll never get that bonus damage. So I might swap that one out for something else. I don't really know what yet, but I'll think about it. Fleet Coordinator, extra 10% bonus damage for when you're in a team. Fluidic Cocoon, when you get hit by torpedoes or any kinetic damage, that could be like grab wells and stuff. Boost your energy damage. This is up most of the time. Most enemies use some kind of kinetic damage. Inspirational Leader, another one of those traits that used to be awesome and is now kind of average, but still nice to have. You sometimes get a little hull cap, a little extra weapon damage and crit and stuff from it, but since you're spamming across this bar of abilities, you usually get a stack or 2 up most of the time. Intelligence Agent Attaché, basically just so I can get my TAC fleet up faster, help my team out. 40% bonus damage for everybody. I may put Into the Breach on. In fact, it's going to be a change I make here live. Into the Breach basically debuffs enemies near you, or that you kill. Yeah, and then the last one, real easy, is just Terran Targeting Systems. 15% crit severity. Can't argue with that. So yeah, that's pretty much it. So this is an ISE run, and I'll just talk about what I'm doing. So here at the start, I'm going to go ahead and try to build some temporary hull stacks with the protomatter consoles while we're waiting for the timer. As you can see, I've already got almost 20 full stacks already by the time the mission starts. A little slow off the line, but made it in time. So helping my teammate out here, I also activate the beacon to disable all enemies within 12 kilometers, just prevent them from shooting back for a little bit. I start shooting as soon as possible on the nearest target there, and I actually get threat from the cube before I'm even in range of it. And then as tank, it's kind of my job to deal with the nanite generators here as well, while my DPSers focus on the actual transformer. So I deployed my shield bubble as well, just to kind of help myself out. Here I'm getting ready to make a run to the other side. Transformer's dead, evasive, across. And I'm on the other side now. You can see all those refractions jumping around. Again, keeping threat from basically anything attacking me. I dropped my sensor interference platform this time to help, you know, stay alive a little longer. Right back to the center. I got a nice torpedo spread off there on both the gateway and the tac cube on my way in. I've already got threat from both of them. Here my hull went down a little bit, and I actually used brace for impact just to make sure I didn't get killed by a big torpedo. You can also see they put tracker beams on me, both the gateway and the tac cube, and I was able to get out of them there. Probably thanks to the low bane bow console. I switched from the gateway to the tac cube here because I'm still able to hit the gateway with fire at will, and it was almost dead. And then I also activate my protomatter regen console here, and I actually fly up a little bit closer to a teammate who I noticed was low on shields. Got within 4 kilometers of them and helped heal them a little bit. And now I'm floating back down kind of at that angle so that all my weapons are hitting the tac cube. It was entirely focused on me, which is great. So this is the parse now. First important thing, I absorbed almost 90% of total attacks in, and a little over 70% of the total damage in, which means that the top DPS players didn't have to really worry about any healing at all. And you can also see there's 2 other players that are a lot lower damage that didn't really have to worry about healing at all, that probably otherwise would have been killed in an elite. And then beam fire at will is up nearly 100% of the time. There's very little non-fire at will damage in this run, and that's because of entwined tactical matrices. The second part, Entropic Rider, Valkyrie Torment Engine, Radiant Detonation, and Chemocyte Lace Weaponry all have that chance to go off on a refraction, which is why there's so much damage from just those abilities. I wasn't really in danger of dying at any point with only 3 protomatter consoles, so it makes sense to kind of bring this layout. You could also be a lot tankier if you ran Miracle Worker and Strategist, but even in HSC I find that's not usually necessary. Alright, thanks for watching. Hopefully you got some useful information out of this. Send me a message anytime you want to talk builds, and thanks for watching.